So in my most recent video, I got a lot of comments from people basically giving me a lot of compliments about how much I'd improved in my Spanish, how much my Spanish has gotten better, and I really appreciated those comments, but I'm genuinely by nature typically a humble person, and so the irony in those comments in this video is that in this video, I like to talk about the things that I still struggle with as a fluent Spanish speaker, but a Spanish speaker that speak Spanish as a second language. And so I have a couple of things here in this video that I'd like to talk about. Just things that, like I said, that even at my level right now, I still struggle to understand. Some of these things are going to be grammar specific. Some of them will be related to accents or different dialects, things like that. But it's just the intent with this video is to let some of you know that even if you do get to a fluent level in Spanish, you're not going to understand everything. I don't understand everything. I'm fluent, but I don't understand everything, and so that's the intent with this video. I will say I'm getting distracted. And there was a gunshot right there, kind of in the country over here. But one of my best friends, one of my childhood best friends, is over there working out, watching me. It's just by chance that we're both at the park. And then there's a couple of kids right in front of me playing, and their father's over there staring me down as if I weren't here first. You know what I mean? But I understand. I'm not. The kids can play, but I'm just saying I have distractions here. So if I'm not sounding coherent, I always give you all that forewarning. Here we go. So the first thing that I struggle to identify in Spanish would be grammar mistakes that native speakers make. To this day, again, I've been speaking Spanish for 4.5 years. I could not tell you what a grammar mistake that a Spanish speaker makes. You know how in English we can say someone has bad grammar if they say certain things that we clearly know are not standard English. You know what I mean? And I don't know. Bad grammar is not subjective. There are associations with bad grammar that I don't agree with. But either way, objectively, there is such a thing as bad grammar in English. I don't know what that looks like in Spanish because the only thing that I could point to is someone, instead of saying para qué, someone saying pa qué. I understand that that could be mal visto, that could be seen poorly in a professional setting, or that could be considered bad grammar. But outside of that, and outside of certain Spanish speakers saying la gente son, I hear that from some Spanish speakers, which is a mistake in terms of la gente es singular in Spanish. I don't know. I don't know the grammar terms. My point is, I cannot tell you, I could not identify someone that speaks Spanish with poor grammar. Again, I'm aware of the associations with mispronunciation of certain words, the omission of S's, how certain accents are perceived amongst educated folk or amongst, I don't know, certain social classes. I understand that delineation, but I still could not tell you what Spanish what poorly spoken Spanish is in terms of grammar by a native speaker, because I don't hear that often, even from like I don't want to classify ways that people speak, but from the most pristine to the most rugged forms of Spanish, I hear consistent grammar patterns. I don't really hear much of a difference in terms of grammar. And so again, that's one thing that I just don't understand. If some of you could highlight any points in particular that show poorly spoken Spanish in terms of grammar by native speakers in particular. I'm not talking about uno de mis paisanos, one of my countrymen, saying what do we say? Buenos tardes. I'm not talking about that. That obviously. But what's bad grammar by a native Spanish speaker? Again, I'm thinking as I talk now, maybe them miss them confusing genders happens as well, so maybe that's part of it. But even with that, I don't know. The next thing that I still struggle with sometimes is, and this is particularly with Mexicans, I've noticed that Mexicans a lot of times will use the subjunctive in instances where the subjunctive triggers are not present. Again, those of you who are at a certain level in Spanish will understand this. If you're not, que tengan paciencia. But in most Spanish-speaking countries, usually, with certain exceptions that I'm familiar with, usually, if someone's going to use the subjunctive form of a verb, there are patterns that follows. There are triggers that you can notice. There are tenses in the sentence that let you know that they're speaking in the subjunctive. Again, it's not this thought out and this calculated, but you can tell, you know what's going on. However, there are times where, in particular, Mexican Spanish speakers will say things with the subjunctive that don't follow those trigger patterns. And I know some of you are going to ask, like, can you give me an example? I tried to reflect on examples before this video. I didn't have a lot of time, and I couldn't. But, like, there are times when they say, for example, let me think. They'll say, like, they'll say if he comes, and they'll say like si venga or si pueda. And it's not in instances where I know some of you are like, well, yeah, that makes sense in this case, but I'm not talking about the cases where it's normal or where it's expected. There are cases where I hear Mexicans a lot say the subjunctive in instances where the subjunctive is not used by the average Spanish speaker in other countries. And so that usage of the subjunctive is something that still throws me off. Again, I've said this to someone else before, and they're like, what are you talking about? No, they don't. But I've noticed it, okay? The third thing is I remember when I first learned Spanish, I learned that the indirect object pronoun, I think is what this is called, le, like I think that's what it's called. These pronouns like him, her, him, her. I'm going to give something to him, give something to her. Le. Again, I can't make every video beginner friendly. So those of you that speak Spanish, le, right? You know, if you say, like, I'll just use my friend Jalen. If I say, le voy a dar, o sea, voy a darle a Jalen mi computadora, o voy a prestarle a Jalen mi computadora. I'm going to lend or give my computer to Jalen. If you're saying it to a certain person, you have to say le. You can't just say, voy a dar a Jalen mi computadora. Voy a prestar a Jalen mi computadora. You can't say that. You have to say, voy a darle, voy a prestarle. But my question to you all is, I hear I hear this, okay? Like, for example, on my channel, I want to motivate people. So I can say, quiero motivarle a la gente. I hear that. I do hear that. Quiero motivarle a la gente. Exactly. And I was thinking about the translation as that being, I want to motivate them, the people, but it literally would be, I want to motivate him or her, the people in Spanish. I don't know if that's a good translation, but those of you that speak Spanish know what I'm talking about. My misunderstanding still to this day with that is I hear Spanish speakers say, quiero motivar a la gente, o vamos a animar a la gente, o vamos a empujar a la gente. ¿Por qué no tenemos que, o sea, por qué esa palabra no tiene que llevar le? Why don't we have to say, or maybe we have to say it. Give me a second with this plane. Delta Airlines, Atlanta. I love it, but I hate it. Great access to international flights. I can get out of here anytime I want. I'm not that far from the airport, but this is the dilemma that you have. So yeah, as I was saying, I don't know because I hear Spanish speakers say this a lot. They say quiero motivar a la gente, and they o sea, quitan la le. They don't say le, quiero motivarle a la gente. They just say quiero motivar a la gente. And so that's something that confuses me. ¿Será que están equivocados? ¿Será que estén equivocados? I don't know. I'm super distracted, but his dad is yelling at his kids. But yeah, which one is correct? I don't know. That's another thing that I still don't know. This is going to be very bare bones of a video. This is all in one take, and it's not as organized as I normally am. The next thing is I hear Spanish speakers say this at times too. I was under the impression and still am under the impression that when you use la palabra demasiado, like too much, that word, because it ends in O, has to agree with whatever you're talking about. And so if you say demasiadas, as if I say too much fruit, demasiadas frutas, too much love, demasiado amor, too many people, demasiada gente. But there are times where I say, I hear planes. There are times where I hear native speakers say demasiado, and then afterwards they say something that's feminine. Or I hear them say demasiado just as a general term describing something, describing a noun, but they say demasiado, and they don't change the gender with that. And so that's something that still o sea, me cuestiona a veces cuando escucho a alguien decir eso, como, o sea, hay que cambiar la palabra demasiado a demasiada, a demasiados, a demasiadas, o no, porque a veces lo hacen, a veces no. The next thing, I'm not sure what number I'm on. The next thing that I still struggle with, and I don't have to struggle with this as often because I don't do this as much, but using the past subjunctive. You guys are getting a grammar lesson today. But the past subjunctive, like this. Me dijo que viniera anoche. O ella me dijo que viniera anoche. She told me to come yesterday. That viniera for venir is past subjunctive. I know the rules for that with common verbs. But if I'm thinking about a verb like, I don't know, particularly not an AR verb, because AR verbs are easy to do this with, but an IR or ER verb like batir, okay? Or partir, which is like to split. I think that I would say, I don't ever say she wanted me to split the pizza. I don't say that. I don't say that. But I'm imagining that that would be, I'm going to try it. But here's the point that I'm making with me having to try this because I don't know these verbs off the top of my head. I would say, ella quería que yo partiera la pizza. But I don't know if that is correct. I'm just following a rule, but I don't know if that's correct. And so what do I mean with this point? Again, I'm all over the place. Verbs in the past subjunctive that I don't use often, I do not know when I'm using them if I'm saying them correctly. I don't say them often, so that's why I don't know if I'm saying them correctly, but that's something else that I still would struggle with. Usually when I'm saying the past subjunctive, I'm using verbs that I'm very familiar with, so no es un problema. No hay problema, perdón. Qué pena, no es un problema. Oh, sí, no hay problema. But in times where I'd have to say this past subjunctive with a word that I'm not familiar with, in terms of its past subjunctive conjugation, it's a struggle for me. The next thing, I do not really understand, and this is the last thing, guys. This is a very short video, and part of the reason why it's somewhat rushed is because I want to work out before the sun goes down. Again, thankfully, I am able to move my body again, and so I'm extremely happy about that. Plus, I want to try to catch the end of my friend's workout. It looks like he's wrapping up. But the last thing that I still struggle to understand are people from Spain, from certain parts of Spain, and people from Venezuela. When I say people from Spain, I am not talking about the standard Spanish accent. I'm talking about specific Spanish accents, in particular, Spanish people that use a lot of Spanish slang. I've invested a lot of time listening to Puerto Ricans. I still struggle to understand Puerto Ricans at times. But I understand Puerto Ricans because I've listened to Puerto Rican podcasts. I understand Dominicans. These accents that people say are difficult to understand, I understand them for the most part. Colombians, I understand all of them. I understand all of them, like all of them. Peruvians, I understand them all. Mexicans, I understand them all. I do not understand all Spanish people because I don't spend a lot of time consuming a lot of non-standard content from Spain. I follow a podcast called Las Ideas para Vivir Mejor from a guy in Spain, but he's speaking about health, wealth, mental health, personal finance. He's speaking about standard topics, and so he's not using Spanish slang. Ay, tío. I don't even know how to imitate them. But that's one accent that I still don't understand extremely well because of the slang, and that's also true about Spanish spoken in Venezuela, but not all of Venezuela, in particular Caracas, and in particular los barrios de Caracas. I have some students that are from Venezuela, and I have some friends here that are from Venezuela, and I understand them completely until they start bringing out that Venezuelan slang because I'm not familiar with it. I'm not familiar with it. I don't know if this is Venezuelan, but I was taught this by some Venezuelans, like guacala and different words that they say down there that I'm just not familiar with, that are scattered all throughout the Spanish. It makes it difficult to understand, and so that's another thing that I struggle with to this day. I'm getting better interacting with my friends and my students on a regular basis, but it's still something that I don't understand. I apologize for the informal nature of this video. Hopefully it's been helpful. Hopefully it's humbled me in your eyes and hopefully it's let you know that there's nothing wrong with not understanding everything or still having some misunderstandings even at this advanced level of Spanish. I hope this video was helpful. I'm going to look back at this video when I edit it, and if you see this video, it's because obviously I thought it was fine and I uploaded it. If not, I will re-upload this video at a more convenient time when I don't have a grown man and an F-150 staring at me to my left, when I don't have one of my childhood friends that I've known since I was maybe in 4th grade staring at me like, what is Mike doing on this camera? I thought we were going to work out. Chicos, siempre les digo que los aprecio mucho, que este video te haya servido y hasta la próxima. Chao.